All right, here we go. We're back to our rendering lessons. Today, or for this lesson, we're going to be focusing on the panel toolbar. So that's the little bar at the top here. So let me get into this window here. And we're going to focus on this right now. I'm going to show you what a bunch of these different controls are, because now that we get to rendering, you're going to need some of these things a bit more. So the first thing I want to focus on is the little pull-down menus at the top of this the panel toolbar here. Get situated here. All right. So well, I'm just going to focus on the ones we're going to need for rendering, and I've edited things down to just the tools that I have found useful for these kind of things. So the key one is shading. So of course you're going to have shading, which if you want a wireframe image. If you want a smooth shaded, all. If you want wireframe unshaded, which is useful when you're modeling sometimes. Here we go. So I'm going to actually get off this. And then you can get to a lot of these things also with some of the other icons on top there. And the next thing is we're going to go to lighting. So right now I'm using default lighting. When you start putting lights into a scene, you're going to need to get to this point here. You're going to have to use all lights, and that will also be the 7 on your keyboard. And you can also sometimes, if you're doing specific rendering or you want to check a light, if you want to just focus on that light while you're setting up your renders, then you go to use selected lights. So those are the key ones we're going to use here. Sometimes you may need to use two-sided lighting. Sometimes the material maybe seems strange, or there might be something wrong with normals. So sometimes this helps if you switch this on. You don't really see much here, but sometimes you will see it. And then the next thing is this over here is panels. So this has, this is where you're going to actually get access to your cameras. Because when you start getting into animation or when you start setting up real complex scenes, you're going to have more cameras in your scene than just the single perspective window camera. So if you notice, you're down here, you'll always see right at the bottom of your screen here, you'll see what camera it is. So in this one, I've set up some other cameras for lessons later on in this. We're going to spend more time just specifically on the lesson on cameras. But if I switch this over, if you notice here, this is now, look at the bottom, it says camera, the name has changed. And I'll go back up here to panels, camera aim, that's another camera. Let's see here, camera demo, that's one, camera aim up. So anyway, we're going to be using all these for different kind of lessons in this, the render program. So the next thing is I'm going to go over the icons here that I find very useful. Now, some of these are not just for rendering. Some of these we've gone over before, and but I just want to kind of review them for you because these make life a lot easier. As I've mentioned in some of the other lessons before, Maya didn't have all these things. You'd always have to go over to the Actor Editor, and you have to know Maya really well to know where things were. Now it's a lot simpler. You have a lot of these icons up here, which are pretty nice. One of them, a key one here, is if you want to get to your camera attributes. This is nice because you can just pop this up. We're gonna, like I said, we're gonna do a whole lesson later on camera control, so I don't want to get into that right now, but it's very useful. And another one is we're going to get into image planes. We've gone over image planes before, so I had a window pop up. You can actually access your image planes here, and yeah, image planes are very useful, especially in the design world. So yeah, that's where we access them from the toolbar. Of course, our good friend, the grid. I've been a fanatic about grids. Here we go, all our grid controls. Let me go that one more time. So if you want to get to your grid controls, hit your grid button, and then right click, and then hit your grid options. Here you can change your grid settings. We've talked about that in class. So another thing here too is you're going to get to these little series of buttons here. These are control how you see your scene and your image. So I'm going to switch grid off, turn this off. So when you start to rendering, when you start rendering things, you start animating, you're going to be basically mimicking cameras, and you're going to be, if you start doing animation, you're going to be matching either real world images that have been filmed, or you're going to be, you know, trying to match something that looks like the real world. So what you have here is you have your film gate. This is specifically related to film. So there's going to be a certain area of this, which is where your actual film is. And then the next part is going to be your resolution gate. So if you see up here on the top, you'll see there's the actual resolution of what you're rendering, and its aspect ratio as well. So this is really useful as you start rendering things out, because I mean, when at a certain point you're going to have certain sizes you're going to, you know, want in certain ratios. And then the next thing is over here, which is your gate mask. So you can either have the edges, just a wireframe here, and then see the rest of your scene, or sometimes people really like to have it blocked out. So that way you have a real, it's like a frame around your scene. Okay. Okay, now the next one is we're going to get over here to some of our, here's where we access some of our controls as well, our image controls. So that's wireframe, which also the equivalent of 4 on your keyboard. Here's smooth shaded, which is the equivalent of 5. Here is texture mapping. We're not going to be in texture mapping yet. Oh, well, actually, sorry, that's default material. That's default material there. So this is just if you want regular, standard, just gray or whatever the, you know, basic material that you haven't seen. Here's wireframe on your texture. And here, let me turn that off. Here is where you would put texture on if you wanted textures. Let me switch over here. Do something now. Now here's where you have your lights. So lights are, well, we're going to get very deeply into lighting. Lighting is one of the key things to rendering, lighting and materials. So I'm going to switch lights on here. Oh, we don't see anything. There's a reason for that. In Maya, before you can see things with lights, you have to have lights set up in your scene. So one of the lessons we're going to do is purely on lighting. So I'm going to show you everything about lighting itself to get things set up in the scene. But what I've done in this lesson is I've set up a whole bunch of lights already. So for demo purposes, I'm going to just put on a directional light, which is kind of the equivalent of like daylight or the sun. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that light on. There we go. So now what this is doing is it's using the specific light that I have here, which is the directional light. So any of the other lights I turn on, I can switch on an ambient light, which will change the scene a little bit. It gives it like an overall kind of lighting, like kind of a cloudy day or just some extra lighting in the background. Yeah. So if you have lights, then you just switch this on. This can also be accessed here, which is by pressing that button, use all lights. There you go. And that is kind of the basics here. Oh, there's one more. Let's see. Where is it? Yeah, shadows. All right. So shadows, of course, that always makes things look realistic. So if you don't have shadows in the scene and you're trying to render a realistic scene, it's not going to look as naturalistic. So that you access there. And you can also access it in the lighting menu here. Switch them off here. Okay. All right. So that is the end of this section, and we'll go on to other things.